Welcome to another Pender Talk. I'm Reverend Will White, the lead pastor here at Pender United Methodist Church, and we're located at 12401 Alder Woods Drive in Fairfax, Virginia. And we hope we see you some Sunday morning. Our traditional worship service is at 9 a.m. and our 11:15 contemporary Common Ground worship service is at 11:15 a.m. You need to know we have an excellent nursery for all of our worship services and activities. Also, mask wearing at this point is optional as the transmission rate for COVID in our community is decreasing. So we hope we see you sometime soon at Pender United Methodist Church. Well, I'm really pleased tonight that we have some wonderful guests. We're going to use first names since we're live streaming. We have a member of our church, Jamie, and I'll tell you why Jamie's very significant for tonight's gathering. And then we also have some Boy Scouts tonight from Troop 1530. We have John, and we also have Chris. And tonight we're going to talk about Pender Night on the Streets. You see, on March the 4th, a group of people from the church and also the Scouts, we slept outside here in front of the church on the premises because we were trying to raise awareness and develop and increase our own compassion regarding homelessness. And so this was really a great opportunity, and these guys have some great stories to share about that, and we'll talk about some things that we learned. But before we get into that, I'd like to read a scripture passage tonight as we begin. This is from Matthew, the Gospel of St. Matthew. This is the 25th chapter, and I'll pick up at verse 31 and following. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All nations will gather before him, and he will separate people one from the other, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand and the goats at his left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer him, "Truly I tell you, just as you did to the least of these, who are members of my family, you did it to me." So, tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about homelessness, and in this passage of Scripture and final judgment, Jesus is reminding those people who are seeking to follow him or following him, when did we help with those who were struggling, who didn't have clothes to wear, didn't have food to eat, and certainly shelter is an essential that we have to have as well. I want to begin by telling you about why I became passionate about this subject. At my last assignment, I was there one winter, and we were digging out after a blizzard. And the church leaders did that after a snow. It was something that we did together, and we were digging out after a blizzard, and we learned a short while later when the local newspaper came out that while we were there digging out, there was a homeless person at the Hanley Library. He was sleeping in the bushes, and the snow had fallen down, and there were perhaps 2 feet of snow there. And there we were digging out, and this guy was dying of hypothermia, had already passed away in the bushes that were a mere 45 yards from where we were working. And there we were, church people. And so we got very involved right away in starting a homeless shelter in that area. We became a part of a network of churches that started a homeless shelter. And I'm awfully glad that here at Pender, we already are participating in a thermal shelter to prevent people from losing their lives in that way. And so we'll be doing that together as a congregation here at Pender, March 27th through April the 1st. And if you're interested in volunteering, you can go to our church's website. There's a sign-up genius. But this wonderful group that we've gathered tonight, Jamie is actually a member of our church who was homeless for a period of time, and she's going to share a little bit about that. And these scouts who are with us tonight, they participated in Night on the Streets, and they were part of the group that camped out on the church grounds. And so I want to start off by talking a little bit, maybe address these questions to the scouts. What are some things that we learned about homelessness while we were out there together? What are some reasons that people become homeless, fellas?
Well, a couple of the reasons that we talked about, that we heard about, was one, addiction, substance abuse, that unfortunately can lead a lot of people into homelessness due to these unfortunate circumstances. We also have maybe just they came on tough times, they didn't have enough finances to support themselves, and it eventually led to them not being able to pay for a place to stay for the night.
Thanks, John. Those are some good reasons. That's right. Chris?
So I think that one of the main reasons was just sometimes bad luck and bad choices, and you get put in a tough situation and you don't have much to work on. It's hard to come back.
Yeah, that's right. And Jamie, you met a lot of people when you were living temporarily, not in an apartment. You were living in your car for a while in some other places. Tell us the kinds of people that you met. What were some of the reasons that other people that you met found themselves in homeless shelters?
Well, there were variations of the reasons why people were homeless. Some people, like we've been told, addiction and recovery. Some people, like me, made a bad choice here or there and found ourselves on the streets. My car was my home. My office underneath my desk was my home. Mm-hmm. Any hotel that I could go to, even if it wasn't really the best place in the world for anybody to stay. Mm-hmm. That was part of the reasons why people were homeless. And the more shelters that I got involved in, ended up finding out that a lot of people had the same situation as me. You had a job, but you just couldn't find a place to live.
Yeah. Jamie, that's important. So guys, what did you learn about homeless people and jobs?
So I think it's a contrary to a stereotype that homeless people are crazy, toothless guys living on the streets, that sometimes they work hard and they just don't make enough to get a house.
Yeah, that's a good point. They don't make enough to get a house.
Yes. Just because someone is homeless doesn't necessarily mean that they are unemployed or they don't have a job. It just means that at that point in time, they just can't financially support to stay somewhere, and mm-hmm. they need to use the money for other things like getting food or maybe mm-hmm. getting some shelter for the night.
That's a good point, John and Chris. You know, housing around here is not cheap, right? Housing here in Northern Virginia is very expensive. And so these guys who find themselves homeless, a lot of them have jobs. It's just that they can't afford the zip code they're living in. And that's a reason that some guys and ladies become homeless. And some of them, so yeah, you guys are learning quite a bit about it. Now, in terms of where they live, what did you learn about that? Where the kinds of places that homeless people might live, boys?
Well, really depends on where they can find. As mentioned by Miss Jamie, some people live in their cars, if they still own a car. Some people can also live in their office if they are permitted or if they manage to. But sometimes people are left to sleep outside. They maybe get some boxes, sleep under some bushes. Really, most of the time, they sleep wherever they can get, whichever place is most comfortable, most warm for that night.
So they like to stay in places where they can find warmth and shelter, and it's probably really hard.
And a lot of them will live together, and they can have generators and lights, and they can and they look out for each other. That's what you were talking about, yeah. That's right. A lot of guys will do that. And around here, there are all these little thin strips of green space between housing developments. And if you look around in those spots, you can often find spots where homeless people have been sleeping. And on some of the public trails at some of the battlefield parks around here, if you look back in the woods, you might find places where there are tents and tarps. And as you mentioned, some of these guys have jobs, but some of them don't. And a lot of the time, those guys will be working Monday through Friday, and then they'll go home to be with their families somewhere else on the weekend. But their job is up here. So, yeah, you guys learned a little bit about that on Night on the Streets. Jamie, could you share a little bit about where you slept for a while? I think John talked about people who live at their work, and that was something you did for a while.
Yeah, people in my office had no idea that there was actually somebody sleeping underneath their desk. I had a blanket that was covering the whole of my desk, so if a security guard walked by, they would not even try to figure out what's underneath there, so they just walk right by. And so when I wake up in the morning, fortunately my office has a shower and they have an exercise room, so anybody that's down there at 6 o'clock in the morning would think, oh, she's just another person just taking a shower after working out. And I also lived in my car for a while until my car got into an accident, and then all of a sudden I didn't have a car. So I would have to start using Uber to be able to get around, and they were my main part of transportation and still are to this day. But yeah, different places that I stayed at. I stayed at bad hotels. I'd stay at, I never really had any friends that I could stay over with because I didn't want anybody to know that I was homeless.
Mm-hmm. So, Jamie, you shared with the guys. Do you mind sharing with everybody, how did you get out of that situation? What happened?
It was really a bad choice and bad choices that I made. And I had a dog with me that was taken away from me because I was becoming homeless. And so I didn't want to share with anybody what was going on. And, you know, to this day, I still feel just amazed that 4 years ago today, I was actually homeless. And I went through the shelters. Facets has shelters that they do every week. You'd stay at a different church. It could be a different denomination from what you are, but it was a place that you could have a warm cooked meal at night, breakfast in the morning, and then they would also make a sack lunch for you so that you wouldn't have to spend your money that you desperately need to eat.
So you got out of that situation. That you were at Facets. Well, tell us how you got into Facets and how you moved out of Facets onto.
Well, the way that I got into Facets was actually a quite interesting story. I was on my way to my office from a motel that I was staying at, and I made it only to this church, and all of a sudden I saw my friend's sister standing up right outside the sanctuary, and she was taking pictures for somebody, and I something was telling me to look straight up, and I looked up, and there she was. And so I said, hey, sweetie, it's me down here. And I was basically crying at that point because I was in such despair. I didn't know where to go or what to do. And so she came down and she helped me get involved with Facets. And that was the night before that was the last night that I had to be cold.
Yeah. Well, and then you stayed at Facets. Well, you found your way to Pender, too.
Yeah, Pender ended up being my last church that I ended up staying at because during that week, the Lord made his presence known that everything's going to be okay. And by the end of that week at Pender, I finally found a place, and I'm still living in that place now.
And you wound up joining the church and singing in the choir.
Yep.
And we're glad you're around and glad you're a part of things. And that just goes to show that we don't have to be what we are at the moment. God's always working with us. We can always make our way to a better way, a better life, and you certainly have. And we're really thankful for your participation with us here. So, boys, as you guys were sleeping out, tell us a little bit about how your shelters. What did you set up for a shelter?
So I had a tarp and some rope. So I was near the bushes in front of the church. So I tied the ends of my rope to the bushes, which were the other ends were attached to the tarp. So I had a prop up thingy, tent, whatever. And I was reasonably comfortable. Not really expecting to be comfortable. I guess I was as comfortable as you could expect to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up putting my sleeping bag inside of there, and that's how I spent the night.
Chris, that was awesome. You had a tarp out there, and you were camping in the bushes. And I shared that was part of my reason for becoming so passionate, because there was a guy who slept across from our church in the bushes. Tell me, John, about your shelter.
So I went more of the stealthier route. I basically just had a basic sleeping bag. I put it in a bivy sack, which helps keep it waterproof in case it rained. And I stuck it in between some bushes.
Yeah.
So there was a space. I put the sleeping bag under, crawled under there, and slept there for the night. Thanks to the mulch, it wasn't too terribly uncomfortable, but
wasn't too bad, huh?
Yeah, wasn't too bad, but I can't imagine how it would have been if I had to stay there for much longer.
Yeah. Well, I slept in some boxes out there, and I really was quite warm and toasty, and it was really sort of an adventure for me. But as I think about it, what would it have been like if we had... So the weekend we went out, it was pretty nice. It didn't get very cold, but then the following week, the snow really came down. If we'd been out there last week, it'd have been a little different. Of course, you guys are scouts. You're ready for anything. You're ready for that kind of challenge. But let me ask you, if you had to stay out like that all the time, and not with nice tents or with decent camping equipment, maybe just with cardboard and things that you could find, how long do you think you could be? How long do you think you could be comfortable like that?
That's more of a tough one, since thankfully I haven't had to deal with any situation such as that in my life. Mm-hmm. So I don't really have a scope of reference to gauge how I might fare. I've camped a couple times with just like a tarp, but that was only for a single night. So I can't imagine what it would be like for so many nights and weeks in a row. So realistically, as much as I'd like to think I could last a while, if it's just whatever I can get, boxes, tarps, maybe only a few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I could make it a few weeks. And I feel guilty about it now. I was complaining about a 3-night camp out we did last month. but that's nothing.
Nothing compared to if you had to do that stealth camping that you did for a long time, it would take it out of you, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be kind of tiring, I guess, and
Yeah.
I guess nervous in a way because you're in the bushes.
Nervous, you mentioned that. How would, feeling on the inside, if I had to live in a box like that, I think I would, there'd be shame, I'd be afraid if people saw me coming or going. I'd be sad. What do you think's going on inside of somebody when they find themselves in a situation like that? Boys, just from your experience out there.
Maybe if they ended up in a situation where they did some things that were wrong, maybe they regret it a little.
Regret? Yeah.
And probably I would not like, honestly, if one of my friends came along for some reason while I was camping out there. That would have been awkward.
You wouldn't want to be seen.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel for most people, there would probably be a sense of maybe despair, like hopelessness. They don't have anywhere to go. This is their only option. It's not like they're there by choice. And maybe, like as Christopher was saying, maybe embarrassment because there is a stigma to being homeless, and a lot of people wouldn't want to admit that to like maybe their friends, their coworkers, their family. Because unfortunately, there is a stigma about homeless people, and it's not a good one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and kind of the reason we do this, and the reason we did Pender Night on the Streets, I think everybody deserves to have someone else treat them decently, like a human being. And that's one thing I think we can all do. When we see people that are in this situation, we can try to be kind, and we can treat them like a human being. In the Christian worldview, we treat them as a child of God, and so, yeah, I think that's the value of doing what we did together out there, guys. Is that when you experience a little of that, you want to treat somebody else maybe just a little bit differently or a lot differently maybe. And I think as we all learn a little bit about what it's like to be homeless, that's one of the positive outcomes that can come from that. So, I was really glad. Jamie, I want to thank you for coming out and talking to these guys and participating in Pender Night on the Streets. There were about 8 or 9 of us that spent the night. There were about 11 of us that came out, and these are some of the stalwart scouts that were out there all night with me. That was awesome, fellas. You guys, I am proud of you all, and I hope we do something like this again. I really do. It was not only it was fun because we were doing this together, but it was also, I think, for an important cause and important reason. Maybe we'll get pledges to help homeless people by the number of hours we spend out or something. Who knows? We'll think of something like that. So for now, though, we hope that you'll find a way to help or volunteer with the thermal shelter at Pender United Methodist Church. It's going to be held March 27th again through April the 1st, and there are all kinds of ways that you can serve. You can serve in person. That's often a very great way for you to make a difference. But if you'd like to make a financial contribution, you can also go to our church's website and make a contribution towards our Easter offering, or you can also select Facets itself. We hope that you'll participate in one way or another here at the thermal shelter at Pender. And once again, we thank you guys for coming on out. And we hope that you'll tune into our next Pender podcast. We have some great video of these guys out there doing it and out there setting up their shelters. And it's going to take us a while to mix it, but we will put that together and put that out for you very soon. And until next time, I'm Reverend Will White, the lead pastor here at Pender United Methodist Church, and I'm very thankful again to my guests, Jamie, John, and also Christopher for coming out. And we hope to see you again very soon. Good night, and may God bless you richly.